Good afternoon. My name is Jamie. I'm with Alsip Nursery in the Frankfurt location. I have been with the company for roughly 18 years, buying houseplants for at least 10 years, and I work between both locations. Today we're going to discuss beginners of houseplants. Houseplants have become extremely popular in the last year, and really gaining popularity, I'd say, in the last 5 years. People come in here all the time, and they find a plant they love, and they want to take it home. There's a few things we're going to discuss so you can take it home and have the best possible survival rates that we can give you. If I keep looking down, it's because I have my notes, so I make sure I hit every topic that we want to discuss. We'll discuss picking out the right house plant, picking out a healthy plant, and the growing media and insecticides. Picking out the right house plant is kind of like picking out the right plant for your outdoor materials. You need to know where you're going to put it, how much sunlight you're going to get, and how big you want it to eventually possibly get. People come in here and see a plant that they love that requires lots of sunlight, and then tell me they're going to put it in the corner in their living room. That's not going to work. The other thing is thinking about your heating ducts and your air conditioning ducts, where those are at. They don't like to be blown on, most of your plants. Which way your window's facing, how far away it is. So those are all things that we'll discuss as we go through the plants. Most of the plants I have picked here are good beginner house plants. There's some, and as we kind of go through, I will let you know which ones aren't, and I have a few picked out on purpose. And then other ones, you know, that maybe we should just discuss a little bit more. So the first thing you want to think about is the area that you're going to put your plants. You need to think about how much sunlight it gets. Most of my indoor plants are bright, indirect light, which that means if you can read in a room for up to 8 hours without sunlight on, without the lights on, not sunlight, reading by the sunlight, you're good to go. You can use that plant. A lot of your green plants are that way. Most of your indoor houseplants don't need direct sunlight. There are a few. I've picked out the cordyline and then croton. Really colorful leaves usually need a lot of sunlight. Also, some of your blooming materials that people buy for indoors. Cilantro, which is a succulent, likes a lot of sunlight. Okay, so usually the more colorful your leaves are, the more sunlight it needs. And saying that, let's also discuss real quickly about the actual sunlight. Your indoor sunlight is not as bright and direct as if you're going to put it outside. A lot of people will buy the house plants, put them outside for the spring and summertime, and then bring them back in. When they put them outside in full sun because that's what they need indoors. There is a big difference. If you're putting your plants outside, you want to put them usually in a morning sun, afternoon shade location, or on a covered porch for the ones that need even less sunlight. The direct sunlight outside will burn them. They may acclimate to it, and that's okay, but you will notice damage and sunburn on your plants if that happens. So, and let's talk about the sizing as well. Where are you going to put it? Is it going on a table? Is it going on the floor? Is it going on a plant stand? Is it hanging up? Or is it going in a macrame hanger? These are all things you need to think about as well. Are you going to put it into a new container? That's all part of the buying process. Most of the time, I would tell you not to upshift your houseplants the day you take them home. Okay? A lot of the houseplants, especially now with how crazy the craze has become with houseplants, and we're happy about it, the plants are being sent to us at a younger stage. So their root system is smaller. You don't want to put it into a larger container, and we'll discuss why later. If you have any questions as we're going, Maggie, they can ask, okay. Correct?
Yep.
Okay, so if you have any questions on the right place, the right plant, let us know. But right now I'm going to move on to picking the right house plant.
If you want, I can ask. Somebody asked us today, which window is great for a peace lily?
A peace lily, if you're putting it in a window, I would tell you eastern window or even northern, as long as it gets filtered sunlight coming through. Peace lilies can take less sunlight than most of the other plants. Mine's literally in the corner in the living room. that I probably can't read with a lamp on for 8 hours. They're one of the easiest houseplants to go with.
And then one more in regards to location is, what are your recommendations for a kid's room?
That comes down to the questions, and maybe you can answer while we're discussing this. Does the kids' room have sunlight? Is it going on a dresser? Is it going on the floor? You know, type of thing. So those are the things I need to know before I answer that question. Okay. When you come here and you're shopping or anywhere else, you want to pick out healthy plants. I would love to say all of my plants are extremely healthy and brand new. Some of them stick around a little bit. Some of them get wet spots. Some of them get a little overwatered while they're here. So we want you to pick out the right plant and the healthiest plant that you can. The things you want to look for when you're picking out a healthy plant is a nice compact plant. So this is a young monstera, okay? It doesn't have any holes in the leaves or anything yet, but it's nice. It's full. It's short. It will continue to get bigger. It will get holes in its leaves. But like I said, it's nice and full. This one, my croton here, has been around for a little bit. Can you see this on the floor?
No, you want to lift it up?
Yep, I can lift it up. So this way he looks really good, okay? Over here he's all naked. Now there's several reasons he could have lost some leaves, overwatering. It made it through the winter and it got a little chilly in here at some point. But, you know, if you could find something that was fuller, that wasn't as stretched in the middle, I'd recommend that. So this is kind of it's a decent plant. It wouldn't be my top if I had other options. It is my only croton in here. And I brought it because it likes a lot of sunlight. So those are things that you want to look for. I think pretty much everything I've picked out is pretty healthy. Now on the other hand, and I'm going to show this guy because it's really small. Okay, this is Taneki Ficus, and it is on the young side. It's healthy, but it's small. Definitely not upshifting at this point. So even though plants are small, as long as they look healthy, as long as you have patience, you're good to go. Okay. The root system is another thing you want to take a look at. And I don't have a plant to show you a bad root system currently. Let me see one that I can take out. I don't think the soil is going to fall off on this one. It might. We'll see. So a few things you want to look at. Tell me if I'm too close.
You're good.
The roots on this are nice and white. They're still on the smaller side, so you know this is filling out to the edge of the pot, but they're creamy. Creamy roots are really good. Roots to the edge of the soil is really good. It's definitely not too tight in this container yet. Rotten roots are brown and dark and soft. These are nice and firm when you touch them. So that is a good, healthy root system. That is important because the roots feed your plant. That's what takes all the water and the nutrients from. And that's extremely important. What else did I want to touch on? Oh, checking for insects, just in general. You know, we try and keep everything under control, as I'm sure every other greenhouse around does. Sometimes we get plants in that have insects that we don't notice. Sometimes things stick around a little bit longer. Sometimes you get powdery mildew on your Ryger begonias. So take a look for those things. You want to look at the leaves. You want to look at the top of the leaves, the bottom of the leaves. The cordyline are a really good one. Looking at the back of the leaves on a lot of things is really important because insects will hide along the veins, like along the stems, and then down in the plants too. So you want to look over all of that to know that you're taking home a nice, healthy plant. We discussed the root system. Before I go into the growing medium, I am going to go over the plants I have selected today because a lot of these are extremely easy to care for. And then I picked out some of the ones that I get the most complaints on or the ones that surprise people when they get home. You can kind of see everything, right, Maggie?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a few different Justinas here because even though they have the same name, they are typically the same care, they grow differently. This is a Justina as well. So Justinas in general, like very bright light, but not direct. The one thing with Justinas, and with all Justinas, I'm going to bring this one a little bit closer so you can actually see. This one hasn't started doing it yet, but Justinas in general will drop these bottom leaves. These are their oldest leaves. I get a lot of people who call and say, oh my goodness, my plant's dropping its leaves. But it has all this new growth on the top. That's absolutely fine. The other thing with Dracaenas is sometimes if they're by air conditioning ducts or if there's not enough humidity, because we live in the Chicagoland area, our winters are very dry. They do get brown tips. Salty water is another big reason for brown tips, especially in peace lilies, and there's a few other plants that are very salt intolerant. Using filtered water, bottled water, rainwater is typically all better than using our water in our house, especially if you have a water softener. I can tell you probably 7 out of 10 times when people come to me with peace lily damage on the eggs or even Dracaenas, my first question is always, do you have a water softener? It's usually yes. So when you take a Dracaena home, don't be surprised if it starts to lose its bottom leaves. These get taller, and then they'll lose the bottom leaves, and it shows scarring, which is really nice. Once again, a medium light plant. If you put it in too much sunlight, sometimes the colors will fade out. They'll turn more of a bleached color. They could get sunburnt, and if they're getting too little, you won't get that variegation in some of them. I also have. Do I have more than that? So this is a philodendron. The monsteras are a philodendron. I don't have any other, I'm trying to look. I don't have any other philodendrons up here. So you can tell there's a big difference between this and this. And then there's also ones that hang in hanging baskets, a lot like pothos, that have a heart-shaped leaf. These are extremely easy plants to care for. Once again, just a nice, bright area. Water when they're slightly dry. We water by weight here, so I have a really hard time telling people how to water. And every household is different, so you need to figure out your household.
So I do have a question. Somebody asked, what about reverse osmosis deionized water?
I have heard great luck with that from other customers. So, I mean, usually using that as well. I don't personally know if there's a water softener hooked up to it, how much salt gets through that. I don't know the background of it, but it is definitely better than using straight tap water, typically. So we were sunlight, the pothos. Oh, I had something I wanted to touch on. It'll come to me. We'll get back to it. So the philodendrons are extremely easy to care for and come in different sizes. Oh, we water by weight here. That's where I was going. So we pick up the pots. The lighter the pot is, the less water there is in the soil. I can tell you at my house, some of my plants get watered every 2 weeks. Some of them get watered once a month. There's not the same, I'm not lucky enough to have them on the same watering routine. I know some people are, but I'm not. People tend to overlove their plants. People tend to pay too much attention to their plants. And by overloving, I mean overwatering. And not having the right pot, which we'll get into that too. But the one thing I always tell customers is when you take it home, pay attention to how long it is before you really need to water. And then the second question is, how much do I water? I don't know that either. I can tell you I put mine in my sink. I turn on the water. Sometimes I go brush my teeth. Sometimes I do laundry. Sometimes I forget about it. But it needs water. So it's not going to be overwatered at that point. Overwatering happens when you water too often, too much. That the soil doesn't get to dry out and allow extra air in there. So I can tell you to give 2 gallons to your container as long as it needs water and it has a drainage hole, and it's okay. I can't tell you that customer A and customer B are going to be watering the same plants at the same time either, because the house temperature, the sunlight amount, all of that, the size container it went into, the soil you use, all of that makes a difference on how much you water. But in general, most of your houseplants are allowing to dry in between waterings.
Yes, so somebody asked, are there any plants that you recommend against self-watering pots?
Against self-watering? So the only things I would, so we're not talking about an African violet pot, because that is always sitting in water. The self-watering, suck them up from the bottom, you usually pour it in the hole or it holds extra water. I definitely wouldn't recommend a ZZ plant. I know it can be done, and we'll talk about this in a moment. Ferns are fabulous for that. You just need to be careful. The thing with self-watering plants is they do need to go through a dry period. So you don't constantly keep it filled up. We used to sell the ones that had the boppers that you put water in, and it specifically said to allow it to go dry for a week, because then that helps allow the soil to dry out. And then you water it, and it fills back up. So that's my thing on self-watering. I really don't like containers that don't have holes, that are self-watering pots. I'm not a huge fan just because I can't control it as much, but that's me personally. The other thing I definitely would say upon that is to play with it, and what works for you might not work for the next person. You know, somebody tells me they've been doing something for 20 years and it's great and want to know my advice. Don't listen to me. Keep doing what you're doing with that plant. Plants are a lot like people. They react differently to everything. You know, I have ficus here that we'll talk about in a minute, that some people never see it drop leaves, and some people it almost goes naked. So really you have to figure out what works with you with the self-watering. Was there another?
There's a water-related question I can ask now. Any tips on watering a Patira Aquatica? I've had 3 that have died when I watered once a month and bi-monthly.
What is it?
I might be butchering this. Patira Aquatica?
Let me take a look. Oh, money plant.
Oh.
So, depending on the size of the pot and everything like that it went into, they do like to go on the drier side. They don't like to stay soppy wet. It's hard to do this because I don't have the interaction with the customers. But it really is, you know, maybe you said once a week and once a month. Maybe it's a 2.5 week. But it is keeping the soil slightly moist on the drier side and then watering well with the money tree. So we talked about the philodendrons, and you guys can't see it, but maybe Maggie can show it at the very end. I have a huge monstera. Oh, can you? Mm-hmm. So this is one of my employees. She bought it in a 10-inch size pot, which we have on the table over here, and it is, if I'm not mistaken, 2 to 3 years old. So she went from this size plant to what you see in that big pot. The sunlight also, once you have the right amount of sunlight, it gets that nice serration in the veins. If you don't have enough sunlight, it doesn't get the holes in the leaves like they typically should. So that's kind of a clue about them. And I think that's one of the other things to touch on too now, the right plant, right size. You're going to go from something from this to possibly that in a few years. So you want to make sure you have the right room. She's at the point where she's not sure if she can take it home again, but that's what can happen. And then I also have ficus over here, and I have a few different ficus. These are Ficus elasticas, which are also a rubber plant. This is burgundy, this is Taneki. I have Ficus Fiddly fig right here. This is just the regular Fiddly fig. And then I have Ficus Benjaminus right here. So out of the ficus that we just discussed, this one is the princess. The other ones are typically pretty easy to care for. Once again, nice, bright, indirect light. If you're not getting enough coloration, you might want to give it a little bit more sunlight, but definitely nothing direct. The biggest difference between the Ficus elasticas, the Fiddly fig, its scientific name is leaving my head, and the Benjamina, if you take home a Benjamina, it might lose half of its leaves. If you breathe on it wrong, if you look at it wrong, if you move it a centimeter in the house, it may drop its leaves. It happens. I've had customers come back and they tell me they've lost a quarter of their leaves. As long as you're getting new growth, and since I have this plant, I'll show you the new growth because this has some of it on here. These have nice little green leaves here. That is all new growth. So if this was losing leaves and then it had that new growth on it, I'd be okay with that. Once it drops all of its leaves or drops half of its leaves and it's not getting new growth, then I would definitely be worrying about that, okay? They're very finicky plants. Like I said, definitely not a beginner plant, and that's why I brought it, because I want you to know that. Let's talk about some lower light plants, because I have a few here. Low light plants, sometimes it's hard to get color in low lights. And low lights, like I mentioned, would be a restaurant setting. And I always like to bring this up because Chili's does a phenomenal job using live plants, or at least they used to, using live plants in their restaurant. They use aglaonemas, they use ZZ plants, they use, what else is it that I have pulled over here? Calatheas, you know, and it's a restaurant style. Pothos do really well. Some of your hanging basket philodendrons do really well in low light. So my aglaonemas I have here, and I love this one because it is colorful, because it does have, you know, it's not green, it has red in it. This is an aglaonema. There are other varieties as well. There's a W, you guys. That's what you're looking for when you're buying plants. It's okay though. So I have a pink aglaonema here, and then I also have the traditional green and silver. They both grow the same. They both take the lower light, and it's nice to get that splash of pink. These stay shorter. They will bush up to about 12 to 14 inches. And then I also have a Calathea here. This one has become really popular in the last couple, I'd say last year. It might have been popular before, but this is Lancifolia, also rattlesnake. These do well in general for the shadier areas in the house. Some of the Calatheas, and it's usually the ones that have more of the oval shaped leaves, are the princesses of the Calatheas. I haven't had any problems with this one, but it seems like the oval shaped leaves will brown up and crisp a lot easier than the others. Just own personal experience, you know, everything has its own testy plants, and I would definitely say that's one for this. This money plant has made its way into everybody's tables and hearts in the last, I'd say, 15 months or so. They're extreme. They're also called the sharing plant, right, Maggie? I know you've seen this online. Because it's easy to break up and propagate, and it just grows so quickly. Very easy, minimal light. Once again, a lot of the watering habits are the same. You're letting them dry out a little bit. Ferns don't like to dry out. That is one that definitely doesn't like to dry out. But, you know, it's another one that'll take a rough life and bounce back. And then I have the pothos. This is marble cream. Pothos have always been a go-to plant for the beginners. They're so easy to grow. This will eventually cascade. So a hanging basket or a plant stand. I didn't grab any plant stands, I should have. But this will grow and it'll bop over, and it does well. They grow quickly. You can neglect it, and it would be okay. So that's one for this. I also have
A lot of questions on this one.
Okay, and I have one. So peace lilies. Peace lilies is a good low light plant. There are so many new varieties out there now too that have variegation in them. They come in different leaf sizes. Some leaves stay bigger, some leaves stay shorter, skinnier. They do flower every now and then. This one has a flower starting. This is one that will get crispy ends, and a lot of that is from salt. Some of it is from the heating that's blowing on it, the drier areas. When I tell people to figure out how to water a peace lily, I usually say, and this is so bad, that let it fall over, let it weep a little bit, because then you know it needs water. I definitely don't suggest doing that all the time because you can damage the plant doing that. But if you figure out that time frame, you know when to water. The other thing, since we're going to talk about salt intolerance and the burnt edges right now, is fertilizing. If people fertilize at home, I don't recommend Miracle-Gro. Miracle-Gro is very high in salt content typically. The one that I've grown to love is Jack's. Maggie, do you see that I have it?
Over there.
Okay. So we bought this product in a couple of years ago, and I actually used to have a palm food, which I would suggest for all houseplants. But the Jack's Houseplant Special is a great houseplant fertilizer. I've had great luck with the Justinas, with the the peace lilies in general. And it does specifically say Philodendron, Dracaena, palm, ivy, ferns, snake plant, ficus jade, aloe vera, spider, cactus, and chiflera. So it tries to cover all of it, but I would tell you this is a really good houseplant fertilizer. Not because we sell it, but because I've tried others and I like it. What questions?
Yeah, we got two. I think you answered the brown tips even when watered. You said that was kind of a salt or fertilizer problem.
Correct. It's salt and also humidity. If it's not any of those, if you've changed your thing, you might want to start looking for insects. I typically recommend taking off the whole leaf as long as you can. A lot of people, you'll see, cut them into V's. That just opens up an area for fungus to come. So as long as it's not a peace lily that only has 3 leaves, I'd recommend taking off the whole leaf and let it get healthier from there on.
So another peace lily question, 2 of them. Best way to revive a peace lily, and somebody else asked, how quickly do they bounce back?
So if we're talking about the water bounce back, I would say typically in 3 hours. I've done it a few times at home, and it is within just a few hours. If it has been like that, like if you just forgot about it and it's been laying over for a few days, I'm going to say if it's not bounced back within 24 hours, it's probably not going to.
And what's the best window for a peace lily?
An eastern or a northern window. Oh, and what was the other question? About reviving or something?
Yeah, how do you revive a
So
peace
it's
lily?
going to depend on what's wrong with it. It's a question I would need to ask more. A lot of times, if you've neglected it a few times, you'll have leaves that brown and fall off. Pull those out. If you have yellowing leaves on a peace lily, yellowing leaves is typically overwatered. And I guess it would depend on if your root system is still healthy too. Because if your root system is shot, there's no reviving it. So there would be a few more questions I'd ask on that. ZZ plants is one of my favorite plants. They can take almost no sunlight. They can take almost no water. They are very good bachelor plants. And they keep growing. Realistically, I would tell you in a corner with just a bright area, not even direct. I know they can do the basement. I know they can do full sun, and I cringe when I say that, but I do have a friend who has it in full sun. I'm going to tell you her leaves are not dark like this, and she probably does water it a little bit more than you would need to if it wasn't in the direct sun. They typically like to go on the drier side. They hold all the water in their tubers down here. That's why they're so fat. The other thing, if we're going to talk about a ZZ plant for a minute, I definitely recommend a heavy pot when transplanting it. Or if it's not time to transplant a heavy pot to sit it in. The ZZ plants will typically get as wide as the container you put it in, and their root system gets very thick and bulbous, which can break pots. And they can topple over a little bit. So that's where the heavier pots come in handy.
Somebody asked what your go-to plant is. Would that be the ZZ?
Well, I love ZZ plants. What my go-to? Oh, you know what? It changes every time something new comes into the greenhouse. I mean, honestly, sometimes I buy plants because of their name, and then I fall in love with it, and then they don't sell them anymore. I don't have the place at home really to put some, so I have a peace lily. I have a Christmas cactus I've kept alive, and there's a few. I really like my tropicals, but dang it, let me think about this. I'll get back to you.
And then another person asked about the ZZ plant, that they heard that it could cause a skin reaction in some people. Do you know if that's common?
It's the if you break the leaf and you get the sap on you. Yes. If I'm not mistaken, and please don't quote me on whether things are toxic or not, because I would definitely be looking on the ASPCA website. They have a phenomenal area for toxic plants. But yes, it definitely can. And everybody is different. Poinsettias can cause a reaction on people's skin. Some of the euphorbias, like pencil cactus and everything like that, can cause different reactions on people's skin. Typically, it's rinsing it off. Wearing long sleeves when you're dealing with plants if you're repotting, because usually you shouldn't get sap on you unless you're repotting and break something. So I don't doubt it. Absolutely not. Before we get to the rest of the flowering, let's talk about string of everything right now. A string of XYZ is extremely popular right now. And we've had our trial and error. Corey and I have. She's one of my employees, and we've tried lots. We've failed, and we've learned. So right now in my hands, I have a very small string of turtles. We just got them in. I told them to ship them to me because they are so popular right now. I have a string of pearls, and I think this is called string of beads. It is string of beads. There's string of hearts. There's string of dolphins. There's string of watermelon. So there's a lot of strings. The one thing that I definitely recommend for people to do is your homework before you buy plants. We learned very quickly that your string of plants need the top of their soil to get sunlight. Most of your hanging baskets, like pothos or ivy, as long as you're getting the hanging down part and some sunlight, they're fine. The string of plants are not fine that way. They definitely need the top of their roots and the top of the soil to get sunlight. I would tell you that's the trick, and that's the number one important thing. They are succulents. Typically all of your string of plants are succulents. So they don't like to be overwatered. They do like to be on the drier side. And depending on the root system, when you purchase them, because they don't have huge root systems, you need to lightly water them. If I were to just put this in my sink and turn on the water, they'd probably go flying everywhere because the root systems are so small. And that's something else to keep in mind when you're watering, is how the root system is made. The string of everything's like bright and direct sunlight, not direct sunlight. And I'm calling the string of everything because there's so many different kinds. And while we're talking about root systems real quickly and why things need to be repotted and don't, I'm sorry I'm all over the place, you guys, but I'm used to doing this in person. The Dracaenas have a very small root system for the size of plant that they are. Very shallow. I do typically recommend a heavier pot to put them in. I don't recommend repotting them too often, and that's also a reason you need to know how you're watering, because the root system is really small for, this might fall apart, I don't know. The root system is pretty small for the soil. Oh, this one's decent, of course. So sometimes in the bigger plants, what will happen, this goes all the way to the bottom. This is a phenomenal grower that I have. Sometimes the Dracaenas will only have a root system to like here, and the rest is just empty soil. You definitely don't want to go repotting that until it has filled up the bucket like this one is. I still wouldn't repot this, but it's better than some of the other ones I've seen. Corn plants, which is also a Dracaena mesangiana, is the same way too. You need to be really careful when repotting these guys.
In general, somebody asked, when do you know when to repot? Nothing specific plant-wise, but what's like
to repot, I typically, you need to look at the root system, or if the plant is literally falling out of its container, that's a good time to do it. Most people, if you're taking a plant home, my spider plants always need to be repotted, typically, but most of the plants that you take home, I'd say you're almost okay leaving them for 3 to 6 months, depending on the plant. And I know people go, 3 to 6 months in that green grower's pot? That's ridiculous. We got a solution for that too. Hold on. ZZ plant right here. This is a good starter plant. It's also called mother-in-law's tongue. Sansevieria. Thanks for the look, Maddie.
I know some things.
Sansevieria, also called mother-in-law's tongue. I always like to say it's because it's like a mother-in-law that doesn't go away. They're hardy. They like to be in a bright area, but no direct sunlight. It's not necessary. They like to dry out. We're having a few issues with getting some of the stuff that I just talked to my vendors because of hurricanes and because everything that's happened. A lot of them ended up with a fungus, which you can't get rid of when they're babies. So getting ZZ plants in haven't been the easiest thing in the last couple months. I bought a whole bunch at one time, and I'm happy I did now that I just found that out. Let's talk about blooming plants indoors for a moment because it's a thing. I talked about the Kalanchoe because it likes bright sunlight. Kalanchoe will bloom for months and then it'll stop blooming and it should rebloom. The Cyclamen is another great indoor plant. Bright light, no direct sunlight. It is a bulb. Root rot is a real thing on these. Overwatering and killing the bulb is a real thing. So letting these dry out a little bit between waterings. Like this is a heavy pot right now. I know you can't feel it, but this is heavy. I would wait until it's like light, like the air, to water. Sucking up from the bottom is really helpful on a lot of your flowering plants, so you don't get water in the leaves. And they're usually a smaller pot anyways. When these are done blooming, this guy of course doesn't have one, but they'll get a bulb on the end of this flower. It won't be a flower anymore, but it'll look like a bulb. You pull these stems out or cut them off as far as you can in the bottom. Usually they just tug out really quickly. And that's how you deadhead these guys, because it is absolutely necessary. This is a bulb. Sometimes they just putz out. They need a break period, like our tulips and our hyacinths do. So a lot of times if things start to, kind of pewter and slowly go downhill, I usually tell people to just let it rest. Put it in a corner, stop watering it, forget about it, bring it back out in a couple months and start watering in the sunshine. See if it revives itself. Oxalis Shamrocks are the same way too. They'll putz out because they're a bulb for indoors. We use them indoors. I'm going to start this right now. Please don't ask me too much about African violets. I haven't mastered them. They're great, colorful plants. People have luck or they don't. There's no in between. This is definitely one that is good. It likes to keep the soil moist. They sell African violet pots that actually just sit it in the water and it sucks it up. And then you do let it go dry. You don't have to put water in there right away. But there's a water cycle with the African violets. African violets get powdery mildew from the leaves, from plants being too close together. No direct sunlight. No direct sunlight. Just a nice bright area. White begonias are another great one for blooming indoors that you don't need direct sunlight. They're colorful. They're great. The downfall of blooming houseplants, because there's a downfall in everything, they don't bloom all the time. They will rebloom, but they don't bloom all the time. A lot of people will throw them away after that. A lot of people will buy another one after that. I'm okay with that. If you're okay with some green leaves for a couple months in between, you can definitely clean them up. You can definitely get them to bloom again. It might take some work though. Give me one look.
Somebody asked, any ideas to have an amaryllis bloom a second time?
If we're talking about a second time, another season, for indoor bulbs, if you can, and I really, because I found this on accident, I'm sure it was on the internet somewhere when I needed it, but I leave things in their container when it comes to bulbs. I let them completely dry out, and then just put them somewhere where I forget about them. And usually, if you want your amaryllis to bloom around Christmas, December, you typically want to plant them September, October, or start watering and then bringing them out again into the sunlight. Warm up their soil too. Bulbs, it's really important to have warm soil to get them going. Second time in a season, I have nothing for that. Sometimes they'll send up the second shoots if that's what you're asking. It just depends on how much energy the bulb actually has. The older the bulb gets, the more energy it should have, to where it might send up more than one flower stalk. But if you're asking for it to bloom in October and then bloom again in December, I don't think there's a way to do that. I don't have an answer for that. But the second season is what I first explained. What else? We have cactus down here. Can you see the cactus, Maggie?
Yeah, let me.
I have a few. Let me move the croton since we talked about it. Croton is another one, if I didn't mention, that likes a lot of sunlight. It is picky when it comes to watering. You have to find that right watering habit with croton or it will just start dropping its leaves. So that is the only downfall with the croton. It's a beautiful color. The more sunlight you give it indoors, the more color the leaves get. There's hundreds of different types of crotons, but you have to get down the watering habits. So the cactus are down here, and then I guess my succulents could be my string of everything. Cactus, as much direct sunlight indoors as you can give them. A windowsill in direct sunlight. You want them to dry out between waterings. During their active growth season, the summer, the spring, you might need to water a little bit more because it is actively growing. It's actively using more water. But in the winter time, you want them to go dry. I know I've heard in the past like putting them in a dark location in the winter and stuff like that. I've had just as much luck just keeping them out and watching my watering habits. They're not actively growing in the winter typically for us, so that's why it requires a lot less soil. So I talked about the cordyline. He's the one who needs a lot of sun indoors. He will tolerate lots of sun outside. You see these in the middle of planters a lot with annuals. It does take some adjustment. When plants are shipped from Florida, because that's where I get most of my plants, they go through an acclimation period where they actually put them under some shade because they know they're coming to be indoor plants. So they have been already acclimated before they get here, and then typically we don't have as much direct sunlight in the greenhouse in the wintertime. So if you put them outside and they start to get burnt, that's why. Go ahead.
I had a question on succulents. Yeah. What's your recommendation for potting succulent clippings? And another person asked, can you plant succulents outside?
You can plant them outside depending on the variety that you have. They may or may not come back. There are definitely perennial succulents. We'll carry those in the perennial yard come season, but there are some, sedums, and there may be some zone hardy echiverias to plant outside. So yes, you can. For the cuttings, I recommend putting them into soil. Having a thinner tray, some of our grower trays, and using a succulent mix or a cactus mix with regular potting soil and putting the clipping in there. Best way to water those is to spray bottle the soil because you want to keep it moist, but you don't want it soppy wet. So getting the clippings to root, that is how I would recommend it. There's also rooting hormones. I don't have any down here because I wasn't ready to discuss that today, but there are rooting hormones. And all depending on the variety of succulent that you're looking to do, there's different ways to do them. So, it would definitely be doing some homework before you start doing that. Because some of them do it just from leaves, and then the ones that vine, you'll do like actual clippings. So.
And what's the best soil for replanting snake plants?
Depends on how good you're at watering. Honestly, if I were doing a snake plant, I would use a mix of regular potting soil and a mix of cactus or succulent soil. Okay, they can hold a little bit more water. I get a lot of people at home when we discuss this in the store about repotting succulents or cactus or anything into regular potting soil. It can be done. You need to be more careful with your watering at that point. You need to make sure it's drying. The regular potting soils don't drain as quickly as your succulent and your cactus soils, and they definitely hold on to water a little bit more. So I would do a mix though on the snake plant. Since we talked about all of our plants, we can talk about some of the different soils. We carry several different varieties of soils here. Fertilome and Espoma are two of my favorite, and we carry different varieties than what I have here. We just brought a little bit of everything. So we do carry the Fertilome cactus soil, and then we carry an Espoma cactus soil as well. African violets do have their own soil. They have their own fertilizer. From all the research and homework I've done, I would tell you to buy the African violet stuff for the African violets. They're still picky when it comes to reflowering. So there is that. I didn't touch too much on orchids, but there is specifically orchid bark or orchid nuggets too. You don't want to put orchids into regular soil. Orchids could be a whole other seminar. And then we also have Espoma Organic. We have Miracle Grow. And then we also have Miracle Grow Moisture Control. Let's talk about moisture control for a minute. Moisture control holds moisture. Okay, I've had a few customers, and to no fault of anybody, think that kind of helps control the moisture a little bit more. It helps hold moisture. If you're really, really bad at watering, sure, go ahead and use it. It is definitely the last one on my list, though, that I would recommend. Even for outdoors, because of the rain and everything like that, you can't control the rain, especially if the planters are outside. So that is the one warning I have with moisture control. It holds moisture, so please be careful. And let's talk about, any questions, Maggie? Are we okay?
There's a few, but let's go on to that next.
Okay.
Yeah, pests is one of them.
So next, let's talk about indoor insecticides. Unfortunately, we are a little low on most of our bonite products, but luckily, I have some that we actually use in the store. So this is all stuff that you can buy. Bonite has changed its name too. Do you know what it was to, Maggie?
Oh, no.
Okay, so the bottles look just like this, okay? But bonite did change its name. I always suggest when taking a home houseplant, even if it doesn't have insects, and your indoor plants as well, as long as you're okay with using a systemic in the soil, I recommend putting this in. This works for 8 weeks. So every 2 months, you'd want to mix this into the top of the soil, follow the directions on the back, tells you how much to use per pot size. This helps protect the plant, okay? So it's there when something happens. It is not fast acting. You can't already have the problem and then use this and expect it to be gone tomorrow. This is very much a protector. It works really well with fungus gnats, which I know I hear all the time on the internet. And then follow the directions on this. Once again, I recommend it for everybody. Now, if you have a major problem, you come in, and we usually have a small bottle of 8 as well. Insecticidal soap is organic, okay? So you can definitely use this, but if you have a major problem, I recommend using the 2 together, because then this is there to kind of help. It takes a few days to get through the plant. That's why you can't do it and expect results right away. We do usually have a smaller bottle of 8 for indoors that is not organic, that is an on-contact killer. Once again, with all of your insecticides, with all of your fertilizers, read the packaging, follow the instructions. It's extremely important. I think this is just an insecticidal soap as well. Yes, so this is safer, another one that we carry.
Can you bring this closer?
Yes, all of them? Yeah. Is this a good? So this is safer insecticidal soap. Once again, organic. This is Systemic Houseplant by Bonide, which we don't have in yet, but it is fabulous. This is not organic. This is not an on-contact killer. It is a preventative and a helper. And then we have another insecticidal soap by Bonide, once again organic. Organics work a little bit slower, so you definitely need to follow the directions. Did I hit all of the?
Yeah, the question was, what do you do when there's bugs on your plants? So that would probably be the
and there's
insecticidal
so many other ways to handle some stuff. And since we're talking about bugs on our plants, every plant has an insect that likes it, just like outdoor plants, okay? Cordyline, spider mites like protein. I don't have any here, but scale loves Shafira. Who? Yeah. On these guys, there's a certain aphid that like this specific Ficus Benjaminus. So there's something for everything. You probably won't get an entire plant's life without getting something. Where do they come from 5 years once you have them at home? I don't know. It happens. I get the calls all the time. And they haven't taken new plants in either. So
this is my own question. I hear some people quarantine their new plants when they bring some home. Do you recommend doing that, and for how long possibly?
I don't do it. You know what? I don't have a big houseplant selection either. And that's the biggest difference. There are people who have houseplant collections that are worth thousands of dollars. I absolutely would at that point. You can't bring that in and possibly have something with everything else. Now, with saying that, when you quarantine, I would highly recommend doing something to it as well. Because once again, you don't know if there's something in the soil that takes a little bit longer to come out, and we would never know that either. The houseplant systemic is a great way to go with that. If you're using and wanting to go organic, organically, I guess one of the things would be to use the insecticidal soaps. You can't hurt it. It's organic, but follow the directions. I would say a week to 10 days, is what I would do for quarantine. But that is where the granulars come in handy. And putting it on your other plants too. Like, even though your other plants are fine, it doesn't hurt. We didn't talk about pots. Do I have time?
Yeah, you have
Okay.
as much time as you want.
Sorry.
There's also a few more plant questions that we'll kind of spitball at the end.
Okay, so I had Ralph bring me some pots so we could discuss. Now, when replanting a houseplant, once again, I don't recommend it right when you go home unless it absolutely needs it. I discussed these fabulous green growers pots that most things come in. People don't want to look at this, and I get it. They fit right into something else, though, that you can do. You want to make sure you can take it out, and for two reasons. So you can get it out and repot it. And second reason is, this one does not have a hole. Let me get the rest of this out here. It has no hole. So if you water this in here, and it's too much water, it's going to sit in water and you not realize it until it smells funky. Okay? But it's a nice pot because it just, I work in a greenhouse. It just fits right in there and it looks good. And it's pretty flush, so you can't tell that it's a drop-in. That is what I recommend for these guys, is drop-ins. Or using that pot as a drop-in. Now, Ralph also brought this guy. This guy does have one hole in it on the side. Can you see the hole?
A little bit closer.
Closer? Can you see it? So it has one hole. I'm not a huge fan of that either. But it's better than no hole. This is a great pot to drop in because the water does come out. Okay? It still doesn't hurt to kind of tip it over. If you're planting in this container, and only because I just had this experience this summer, I had this hole get clogged up on a customer because it was just planted right in here. Normal, right? You just planted a pot that has a hole. We worked on her monstera for months. She swore to me she wasn't, watering it too much. She swore the container had a hole in it. She wasn't lying. The hole got compacted with soil. So it was literally still just holding on to the water. In these, it's a little bit harder because it's on the side. We do carry a product called Better Than Rocks. It's kind of a little foamy type product that you could shape to put into the bottom here. Maggie's going to go get me some. You shape it to put in the bottom, and it helps create a layer between the bottom and the soil. You can use rocks as well, as long as it, you don't want it to get too heavy being indoors either. But putting something on the bottom of these definitely wouldn't hurt to help the drainage. I know it has a hole already, but it's not fabulous. And I have seen the containers get the soil compacted in there. Once we got more drainage in the bottom of the pot, we kept it in this pot. It's done fabulous. I haven't heard from her except for when she comes in to buy more plants. So this was this the smallest or is this like a medium? A medium. So this does come in different sizes. I don't think it comes small enough to just fit in here, but it is just a very pliable, almost like furnace type, material. And you could cut it to fit in here definitely with no problem. So you could put this in the bottom of there and it would help with that area so the soil doesn't get compacted. There's also plastic pots that have saucers that you can put under them. If you have an indoor plant, I highly recommend the drainage. A lot of pots will come where you can poke out the rubber piece on the bottom to add drainage.
What is your recommendation for bottom watering?
What's my
Or
recommendation?
your tip for bottom watering?
A plastic pot with lots of holes in the bottom. That is extremely important. I've never had success with clay pots bottom watering because the clay absorbs it all. The only time I've had success with bottom watering, because I do it, is in the nice generic plastic pots. They're not pretty, but you can drop them into another container. And usually 6 inch and lower. Once plants get into a 10-inch pot, it's hard to bottom water. My peace lily at home, I have it still in the grower's pot. It's in a plastic saucer. I do water it from the top, let it go through, and let it sit for 30 minutes and suck it back up. Whatever hasn't been sucked up, then I'll dump the saucer. But you have to remember to do that as well if you're going to do that with your plants.
I was watching you.
I'm still live. Sorry.
Let me jump this question in. How do I gauge what size pot a plant needs when repotting?
Yes! I can't believe I didn't talk about that. So usually you want to go up one pot size. So if it's in a 6-inch, one pot size is 2 inches, it'd go to an 8-inch. You don't want to go too much larger than that typically. There are some plants, like the Monstera, I would tell you could probably go into, 2 sizes bigger, which would be 4 inches, because they go really quickly. I'll move a little bit closer since we have a cart. But what tends to happen when you go too big is the fact that there's so much soil there that the roots aren't in. And people use the same watering habits that they had previously. You need to watch your watering when you're repotting into a much larger container as well, because that soil holds the water and the root system isn't taking it up as quickly. Okay? I actually just had a customer in here today, and it was a very good conversation because, when you buy annuals, you want to put them into a decent sized pot. The difference between, if you're going to go with that, is annuals grow for one season, they grow aggressively, and then they die. When I take my annuals out of a container at the end of the season, there is no soil that doesn't have roots in it. Houseplants don't grow that quickly. Their roots don't grow that quickly. So that's why we can't follow that same rule. But 2 inches.
So I definitely have more questions.
Okay.
And
I think I've touched on everything. So
yeah, I think I'm just gonna bounce around. So somebody asked if they could use African violet soil for their Calathea.
I don't think it'd be an issue. There's nutrients typically from the research I've done in the African violet soil that is specific to African violets. I don't think it's harmful to anything else. Have I done it? No. Would I tell the customer if they had African violet soil at home to already use it on a Calathea? I'd be okay with it.
Type of soil you would recommend for a Christmas cactus?
Christmas cactus. I would recommend a mixture of the regular potting soil and the succulent soil. If Rolf makes his way back here, I'll ask him. So hold on for that one too.
Is there a general rule for repotting with the shape as is into a bigger pot with more soil versus breaking up the soil from the roots?
So they're talking about just taking the container out, putting it into a new container, and not massaging the root system. The only time I'd really tell you to massage, if this is what we're discussing, the only time I would tell you to really massage the root system is if it was really tangly in there. You might want to pull it apart a little bit. I usually don't tell people to mess with the roots because then they just manhandle them and you can tear them apart, which, the roots would have to get better before the top would start taking off again. The other thing you do want to think about too, because even though it's a 10-inch pot, it could be much deeper than the 10-inch pot that you had it in. And that could be an issue as well. But once again, that's where other things. Ralph, can I get you for a minute? Do you mind being on camera? I had a question about repotting a Christmas cactus. What kind of soil would you use? Let's see.
I would use regular.
Regular potting soil? Do you think it's beneficial to mix with succulent soil or no?
Probably. Yeah, a little bit wouldn't hurt at all.
Okay.
Because you do want something that drains a little faster than regular potting soil, but it's also, I wouldn't use cactus soil because that's not going to
Straight cactus soil.
Right.
Could you hear? Okay, so the one thing that he said, if people didn't hear him, I'm much louder than him in general, is a regular potting soil is the first reaction. And then when I did ask about the succulent soil, he mixes succulent soil with everything, so I can't believe he didn't say that in the first place. Is mixing the potting soil and succulent soil because it does like the faster drainage. Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted. I wanted to make sure I was giving the right information. But
You usually do.
because I learned from the best.
So somebody just purchased a wandering Jew for their kids' room from us last weekend. And should it get direct sunlight?
Not direct. A nice bright area. Like an eastern window would actually be okay because the east is the morning sun, the afternoon shade. I do have the hottest variety these days. I can't keep these things in stock. I also do have hanging baskets. I might not. Oh, I have the green hanging baskets of it. But a nice bright area, indirect. Like I said, eastern window. It's definitely not a plant that you can put in the corner and not get any sunlight. The purple and the silver variegation one that's really pretty, you're going to lose that coloring. And if you don't have any as much sunlight either, you really need to be careful with the watering.
Best care for bamboo plants.
Bottled or rainwater. Dumping the water at least once a month because, you know, it doesn't do anything in there. It just sits there. So I do recommend dumping the water at least once a month, but I definitely would be using bottled water or rainwater. Bright, indirect. No direct sunlight.
And then somebody has asked, what are the best plants for air recycling or air purifying?
So about 10, 12 years ago, maybe longer, NASA did a research on air plants, air cleaning plants. Boston ferns are fabulous, spider plants are fabulous, peace lilies, snake plants, ivy. There's a lot on pothos. And each plant does a little something different. And I'm sure you could look up the NASA air plants research. Like I said, there's a whole thing on it, and it will tell you kind of what each plant cleans out of the air. The other thing I really want to touch on, and I usually do it when people come in and ask for air purifying plants. Don't quote me because it's been a lot of years since I've done the research, but per 100 square feet, you need to have so many plants. So, you know, a lot of people come in and buy 1 4-inch plant to help clean the air. Is it going to help? Sure. Is it nice to have a plant in the house? Absolutely. But I don't want them to think that they're breathing recycled air because their plants are working so hard, you know. And it's a great start. You know, people can't come and buy 10 plants at one time. But keep in mind that it does take a handful of plants per 100 square feet.
Many people like to bring their houseplants outside for the summer. What are your thoughts about doing that?
I think you need to wait until June. I think you definitely need to be using systemic at that point. If you don't use it when you put it outside, you need to start a routine before coming indoors, at least 2 weeks on getting the plant clean, because I would guarantee you there's some sort of insect in that soil, or even on the plants, okay? And then the other thing is keeping in mind the sunlight issues. Don't put it out in direct sunlight. You know, if you want to work it to get into direct sunlight and it's a plant that can, you need to do it just like acclimating to the weather. Putting it in the sunlight for a couple of hours, putting it back into the shade. And doing that for about a week until you can leave it in full sun. And I say June because people will leave their plants out and forget on a night where it drops to like 35, you know, and you could have very well lost your plant at that point.
So fun. What is a great hanging plant for a bedroom with west-facing window?
Ooh, if you're not putting it right in the window, you can use almost anything. I mean, you know, in the west-facing window, because you're getting that afternoon sun. I need a drink. You know, it could burn, okay? But I have some fabulous berries, and it depends on what you want to go. Pothos are extremely easy. Phalaenopsis are extremely easy. Ferns can get messy in the wintertime. Most people don't do Boston ferns indoors just because for that reason. I'm going to grab a plant real quickly. I just got these in, and actually I sell this really well as a outdoor plant. This is called Purple Heart. This company, and plants change names, believe it or not. They have it under Purple Passion, and I believe they have this under a Tradescantia, so where I think I've seen it under a scientific name that starts with an S. So if you're looking for a colorful plant, this would be a really good one. Western facing window. As long as it gets a little bit of shade, your wandering Jews, your Tradescantias.
And then somebody is asking best plants for a north-facing bay window.
Almost everything on this side. You know, you're going north-facing bay window, so it's out a little bit from the house. As long as there's not a ton of as long as there's not a ton of sun coming, no, not sun, as long as there's not a lot of trees covering the amount of sun to come in, you could use almost anything, except for the croton, except for the cordyline. The things that need bright direct sunlight, you wouldn't want to use those.
How dry does a Fiddly fig need to be before watering, or how can I keep it from dropping leaves?
They do like to dry between waterings. I don't want to say bone dry, but I would tell you, and I've used this trick with customers, if it's in a bigger size container, like some of them can, because I mean I've carried some bigger trees, to use a pencil, and just like baking, if you put it down into the soil, and I want you to go a pencil's depth because your root systems go all the way down that, and it comes out without soil on it and it's dry. Just so you ladies know, I don't care that you're shopping, but you're on video. I don't care that you are, please feel free, but I just want you to know. They're going to go to our Facebook page and
See themselves.
So put the pencil in the soil and you bring it out and it's dry, it's time to water. When we're talking about those bigger pots, it's just like baking. It comes out with brownie on it. You need to let it.
That's
it
perfect.
works.
Yeah.
You need to cook it more. You need to let it dry longer.
How do I get my orchid to bloom? Any orchid tips?
Ralph, that really is, and maybe Maggie, you know, if you don't mind doing a seminar like this with orchids, that might be something to think about later on.
Yep.
So I'll touch real quickly on orchids. I've been picking the better than rats. So this is a Phalaenopsis Orchid. It's in bloom currently, and you can see it was blooming at one point in time. Okay, orchids bloom once a year. We had somebody in St. John, Martha, who her orchids always were in bloom. Like, I'm not even lying. They were always in bloom. I don't know what she did. She cleaned the leaves of the banana plants. I mean, she was phenomenal with them. And she, I just saw it. But the thing with orchids, when it is done blooming, so this stalk was this tall at one point in time, and it got done blooming. The top portion probably turned yellow, so it was cut back to here. Unless this is completely dead, unless your stalk is bone brown and done, leave it. You have a better chance of it continuing to grow and get more blossoms. A lot of the homework I've done on orchids is sometimes playing with the temperature, the nighttime temperature. But it's only once a year. And stay tuned for Ralph to do one of these.
I think we do, but do we sell containers for gathering or storing rainwater? I think we have them up front in Frankfurt. Or did they sell out?
I think they weren't ordering any more in because we have those big barrels. I would have to ask Billy, but it's worth calling the store to see if we have any hanging around. I don't think it's something that we continue to buy in though.
What kind of soil do you recommend for repotting Scheffleras?
Regular potting soil. You know, if I'm being at all honest, Miracle Grow is on the end of my list for most soils and fertilizers. The Escoma that we have, if you want to go organic, we have the organic. We also have just regular Fertilome and regular Escoma soil.
I think I got all of the questions, so where can they find you or
in my office? You can always, I am lucky enough to have phenomenal staff here that I've had for seasons. I do have new people that come and go, but I have a good core staff. Ralph and Corey are really good with houseplants. I'm really good with houseplants. I am here. I'm not on the floor often just because of all the other work that I do. But I'm here. You know, usually if you call, if you want to talk to Jamie, call and ask for me. As long as I'm around, I'll answer.
And shout out to Ben and Sharon at our St. John store.
Yes. Ben is phenomenal. Sharon is too, but Ben and I talk a lot more. So if there's anything else, please feel free to give us a call. Our store, St. John's store. Like I said, my staff here that is extremely knowledgeable in houseplants is myself, Corey, and Ralph. Randy can fake his way through a lot of stuff. He's phenomenal. But, you know, the real core houseplant are those two. Are we good?
Yeah.
Have a great weekend, you guys. Hey, do they know the whole store is 20% off this weekend?
This weekend, want to tell them?
The whole store is 20% off, which is my houseplants too.
Few exclusions.
So there are, Maggie, there are some exclusions.
Check out our sales flyer at elsewhere.com.
Yes. Thank you.